Welcome back. With us in studio is Ian Kagiri. He's an investment analyst with Cytonn. Ian, karibu sana.
Thank you.
We understand you've just published an overview of your first quarter banks listed on the NSE.
True.
What is it all about? What's your report all about?
Our report is simply aimed at identifying the performance of the bank, the various factors that influence their performance, and ultimately our expectations with regards to these banks in terms of valuations, which would present the most attractive buy options for investors.
What are your key themes in your report?
At the report, we looked at 4 key themes. We had consolidation. It's simply trying to look at the various, how many banks were coming together or being acquired. We also looked at diversification, how they were leveraging on these alternative channels to generate alternative revenue. There was also regulation. This was centered mainly how regulation affects performance. The main key regulation that affects performance has been the Banking Amendment Act, as well as the Banking Charter, which came into effect. And then finally, we looked at asset quality. It's a theme we noticed across the entire sector with the continuous deterioration in asset quality.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Ian, asset quality, where is the deterioration coming from your assessment?
From our assessment, there are several sectors that banks have been attributing to the continuous deterioration. One of the key sectors has been manufacturing, real estate as well, trade and retail. So those are some of the key sectors that have experienced significant deteriorations. And most of this has been attributed to several factors. One, of course, is there's been a slow economic recovery since the economic slowdown of 2017, obviously due to the elections and the harsh operating environment, the drought as well. It led to a deterioration in asset quality. Some firms have also attributed it to delayed government payments that was there predominantly in 2018. So delayed payments by both the national and the county governments. Some of these small
pending bills.
The pending bills.
The famous pending bills.
But what's the effective then NPL ratio that you're estimating over the next 6 months?
We estimate it to be still range the 10 to 11% range.
So not badly. It doesn't get worse.
You're not saying 15% by the close of the year?
For listed banks, that is
10 to 12%.
10 to 12%.
Is that worse than it was last year? Do you see any improvement in the next year, 2020?
It's worse than, actually the trend since 2016 has been deteriorating. The ratio has been rising since 2016. And part of this may be attributed to, of course, the loan book itself is not growing as fast. So given that
denominator,
it's not growing as fast. So the delinquencies that exist, even though they may be slow, the ratio keeps on rising because of the relative slow in the loan book. However, we may expect some bit of improvement from 2020 onwards. Because we've seen a lot of activity by banks to try and curb the growing NPL ratio. So you've seen several initiatives by banks. Some have been trying to remediate some of these collapsed businesses to help these businesses get back onto their feet. Then they can be able to resume their debt servicing schedule. And then so the government as well has been a bit proactive in trying to reduce the delayed
release payments.
So we hope that that may continue to help improve the quality of the loan book going forward.
But Ian, let's talk IFRS 9. Do you think it has brought discipline in terms of impairment adjustments? Have you seen any discipline, or you're still seeing a significant risk understatement?
Risk understatement. You would see that for banks, even though there's a deterioration in asset quality, it's not matched by a proportionate increase in their provisioning. So for us, it's a point of concern, because we expected that with the enactment of with the coming into force of IFRS 9, we'd likely see increased levels of provisioning by banks, but it's not the case. Part of this, we tend to attribute it to the fact that last year they were allowed to charge off a part of their equity.
The day one rule. Pass it on the balance sheet.
Pass it on the balance sheet. So we think that they may have
passed a lot of it
in the balance sheet to reduce the forward provisioning
through P&L.
Through P&L.
But I think you're speaking to a point that I always hold it. Accounting rules don't address risk understatements generally.
True.
And this is for the simple fact that risk assessment usually is very subjective. Yes.
And this subjectiveness, I think, was increased even more by IFRS.
It has increased the subjectivity.
True, because they expected now to report expected credit losses based on their own credit models. So there tends to be some level of subjectivity that was introduced.
And on the prudential side, do you think there's something that the regulator can do to
at the moment, they've retained what provisioning requirements the CBK already had.
Is that enough, or that's not sufficient?
I don't know if on the CBK, because you see now the CBK would actually end up being more on the accounting, because you still have to report proper accounting statements which are audited. But when you bring in the element of subjectivity, I'm wondering, as a shareholder, how do I streamline that subjectivity? How do I create, or how do I evaluate and say, maybe this bank gives me X amount, but then do I need to add it or reduce it in my evaluation? And how have you captured that in your own evaluation?
For our own evaluations, we've taken up the worst case scenario approach. So we assume that on a worst case scenario, as a shareholder, what do I stand to lose in this bank? And you'll see that for most of the large banks, they tend to be not that aggressive in provisioning. So if you look at their coverages for the bad loans, they are not as high as the traditional foreign banks, the Barclays, the Standards. They tend to be very prudent in their
So how do they compare? So you're saying there's Standard Barclays on one side in Tier 1, and then there's KCB Cooperative Bank and Equity Bank on another level. If you're to compare coverage ratios on average, how would the two compare, locally owned and foreign owned?
The foreign owned, you'll see they're more prudent in terms of their coverages. Their coverages are high, above 70%, the potential coverages. But for the rest, they tend to be a bit lower.
But yeah, and I was looking at the industry statistics. Industry coverage is still very low. It's just under 40%.
True.
And I was quite puzzled.
Yeah.
But I think also it speaks to the fact that there is a, which I call a loophole, that you only provide to the extent that your security covers.
True.
So if you have a loan and there's a collateral behind it, and the collateral covers 80%, they'll only provide 20%.
20%, true.
Yeah, do you think that's a loophole?
Interesting. Let me pause you there. Ladies and gentlemen, the NSC has just opened. Our bell is coming up with you in a minute.